Welcome to A Guide to Every Deck in EDH. Today we're looking at Willowdusk Essence Seer. So Willowdusk is a 3-mana Golgari commander. It's a 3/3 and it has 1 tap, choose another target creature, put a number of +1 counters on it equal to the amount of life you gained this turn or the amount of life you lost this turn, whichever is greater, activate only as a sorcery. So obviously the idea here is we want to have a cheap creature that either is evasive or has some kind of effect based on its power or toughness or how much damage it deals. And then we want the ability to either gain a ton of life or lose a ton of life in the one turn. Activate Willowdusk, put a boatload of counters on that creature, and presumably either win the game or generate a bunch of value. So obviously in EDH, and really Magic in general, it is easier to pay a bunch of life than it is to gain a bunch of life. So our primary enablers are going to be cards that cause us to lose a ton of life in one turn. Now, the main problem here, obviously, is that Willowdusk can't target itself, and even if you could, it has to tap to activate its ability. So killing your opponents via commander damage is already not a viable option. So it will have to be another creature, and that creature, again, is going to have to be either evasive or have some kind of ability that depends on its power, toughness, dealing damage, etc. So right away, let's look at the life drain effects. So obviously, some immediate ones that come to mind are Ad Nauseam and Peer into the Abyss. So these cards are not only great card draw spells, but they obviously drain you a ton of life and allow you to put a crazy amount of counters on a creature via Willowdusk's ability. And we've also got cards that drain life either as much as we want or in a huge amount, or just are cards that are good and incidentally also cause us to lose life. So for the rest of them, we've got Black Market Connections, which is our souped up version of Phyrexian Arena. But we can choose to use all of these modes to collectively lose 6 life in a turn. It also produces a 3/2 for Willowdusk to target, just in case we don't have another creature. We've got Blood Celebrant, which is pay a black and a life to add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. So with Blood Celebrant, we can obviously just add a black mana to our pool using this ability and then activate the ability as many times as we want. We've got Bolas's Citadel, which allows us to cast spells by paying life equal to their mana value off the top of our deck. So it's a great card draw engine, but also enables a ton of life drain. Then we've got Cruel Bargain and Infernal Contract. These are both cards that do the same thing. They're triple black sorceries that say you draw 4 and you lose half your life rounded up. So you draw 4 cards, lose a ton of life. If you're in EDH, you're losing presumably 20 life, maybe a little less if you didn't have as much life when you cast this, but it's still going to be a lot. Necropotence, obviously, you pay 1 life and you can activate this as many times as you want. There's also Unspeakable Symbol, pay 3 life, put a +1 counter on target creature, which you can activate as many times as you have 3 life to pay for it. And obviously it's making the creature bigger because you're putting +1 counters on it. Sylvan Library potentially loses you 8 life when you keep the additional cards. Snuff Out is a removal spell that pays 4 life instead of the mana to cast it. Plunge into Darkness is you sack any number of creatures and you gain 3 for each sacrificed creature, or, and this is the relevant part, pay X life, then look at the top X of your library, put one of those cards into your hand and then exile the rest, so you can pay any amount of life that you want. Go through and find the exact card that you need out of that amount of life. So it is both a tutor and a way to drain a ton of life at once. And then Staff of Completion has abilities that you can tap and pay life for. And the untap is mana related, so it's not as though you can just activate this as many times as you want, but it's either a mana rock on 3 or like a pay 4 draw card, which I think is reasonable given the synergies that we're trying to do with this deck. So those are all of our various enablers. So aside from that, we've just got our card draw, a lot of which already falls into the enablers. Dark Confidant I didn't count because you're never guaranteed to hit anything. And even if you do hit something, it might be cheap, but it is also another potential enabler. Null Perfusion and Recycle as more card draw, also the One Ring, obviously. Figured may as well throw in the Wither Chain combo, we're in those colors anyway. Also, technically, Witherbloom Apprentice's ability to gain life combines with Willowdusk, but not really. Some fast mana, we want to get Willowdusk into play as fast as possible. We also want haste. Again, Willowdusk requires to be tapped in order to use its ability, and we don't want to have to play Willowdusk and pass the turn. So we've got Concordant, Hall of Bandit Lord, Lightning Greaves, Thousand Year Elixir, and Tyvar. Bunch of lands, fairly straightforward Golgari stuff. Then we've got our protection, because again, obviously, we do not want to go through all the trouble of getting Willowdusk into play, paying a ton of life, and putting, 20 whatever counters on something in order to, pump a creature to a huge amount and then try to kill the opponent. only to then find out that, oops, our opponent just Swords to Plowshares or whatever the creature, and now not only did all of those resources invested go to waste, but we can't lose the same amount of life again. So we do need ways of protecting our stuff. So Allosaurus Shepherd, Defense Grid, City of Solitude, and Dosan the Falling Leaf are the green versions of Grand Abolisher. Each player can only cast spells during their own turn. Greaves, Sylvan Safekeeper, and Veil of Summer. We've got all of our various ramp. Also note that any of these creatures are potential targets for Willowdusk's ability, so creature versions of ramp are slightly better. We do need some of our own removal in order to counteract what our opponents are doing. Dismember is also kind of a life drain effect with Snuff Out. It's just not free, but it is 1 mana. You can gain 4. So there's Dismember, Abrupt Decay, Force of Vigor, Haywire Might, Orcish Bowmasters. Of course, we got our Staxy effects, Oppo Agent, Orcish Bowmasters, and Shieldred. And Shieldred gaining life, again, does somewhat combine with Willowdusk, especially if we have something that draws us multiple cards. There's also minor stuff like Haywire Might gains 2 life, but really, you don't want to be targeting something just to put 2/+1 counters on it. You want to be putting a lot more than that. And then we've got our tutors. Obviously, this is pretty standard. Crop Rotation, Demonic Tutor, etc. And then finally, we have Ikra Shadiki, the Usurper. So this is a 5 mana 3/7 menace, and whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, you gain life equal to that creature's toughness. So obviously, we're putting a bunch of +1/+1 counters on one of our creatures. So as long as that creature can connect to an opponent, we can gain back all of the life that we spent draining to activate Willowdusk. Or alternatively, if we don't have a way to do that ahead of time, so like if we're just attacking our opponent normally, this is also a way to just gain life and potentially trigger Willowdusk's ability post-combat to get some +1 counters and go off next turn. Even Ikra Shadiki herself is 7 toughness, so that's at least 7 +1 counters. So the biggest downside here is that there really just are not a lot of good options for creatures to put the counters onto. So specifically in black and green, you would want a creature that does something like, draw cards equal to the amount of damage you deal, or causes your opponents to lose life or something like that. And really, for the most part, there just isn't really any good options. In particular, you want something that's cheaper than Willowdusk, like a 1 or 2 mana creature, so that you can cast that creature, then cast Willowdusk and activate that onto the creature. You don't want to have to play the creature after Willowdusk and then continue to wait. And if you look through the different creatures that you've got access to, there just really aren't any good options there. So for the most part, you are going to be putting your +1 counters on things like a mana dork or just some other random creature in your deck and hoping that that alone is good enough to kill your opponents with. But anyways, yep, that is Willowdusk Essence Seer.